McCown. I'm with the CSUSM Entrepreneurship Society. And today we're going to be speaking with Johanna Robinson. Since for founders, sales can be intimidating, that don't have sales experience. Johanna shares some lessons learned from her foray into the world of sales, which will be helpful to think about building and equipping the sales team for your startup.
Perfect.
Thanks, Stuart. Stephen, you want to start off?
Awesome. Thank you, Stuart. Yeah, thanks, Johanna, for agreeing to speak this week. I know we're all excited to listen and learn from you today. Just for those of you watching, thanks to everyone for tuning in live if you're able to on Zoom today. We also want these videos to be great resources for those who aren't able to watch this live, right? We're able to watch this on demand on our YouTube channel and things like that. So if you have a chance, feel free to give us a like, leave a comment down below if you're watching this on YouTube, share your thoughts, ask a question. All the interactions we get with videos like this help push them out to more people. So you leaving a like, leaving a comment, sharing your thoughts allows, you to continue to impact that community, and also might push the video out to somebody who might benefit from, hearing the sales tips from Johanna today. So if you can, please do so. But I will hand it on over to Johanna.
All right, let me put my glasses on so I can see you all. Carly, you can go ahead and start sharing. Great. This is a little recap of the great intro that Stuart just gave us. So you can skip to the next slide. So a little known fact that I mentioned in my last tech school talk, the one on customer service strategies, is that I worked in sales for about 6 years. And today I'm going to share with you 3 things that I learned that may help you as you begin to build your own sales organizations. Next slide, please. Sales is not a job I ever dreamed of doing. I've had 2 sales jobs, one as an outbound telemarketer, cold calling people, and the other as a sales clerk in the jewelry department of a department store chain. Here are a couple of early 90s photos that I dug out of the time capsule. You can see me on the far right of that group photo when I worked at a bank in Wilmington, Delaware. That was my team, and that's me on the right. Sitting by myself in my fancy silver painted living room that I thought was cool, also in the early 90s. The things that I learned in the sales jobs I just mentioned, the telemarketing one and the jewelry sales in my early 20s, I've come back to over and over throughout my career. So I wanted to sort of share these ancient photos of me from around the time that I was learning those lessons. Curling and Stephen always ask what advice our tech school speakers would give to the younger versions of ourselves. So I'm going to share with you the things that I would point out to little Johanna, that will help you avoid being an unpaid consultant for potential customers. So first, it's key to understand your value proposition so you can communicate it. Second, you need to equip your team to be able to sell effectively. And third, compensation is not nearly as important as you might think. Let's talk about the first tip, understanding your value proposition. I did gloss over the term value proposition, which for many people is not everyday vocabulary. The proposition is an easy to understand reason why a customer should buy a product or service from that particular business. I've shown this service merchandise slide before. I know some of our East Coasters have fond memories of this retail store chain where I learned so much. Before I got this job, I'd only worked in offices. I had mad typing skills. I can type like 120 words a minute. And that got me a lot of really great jobs when I was pretty young and didn't have any work experience. So I'd only worked as a receptionist or a secretary or as a typist. I even had jobs where, I wore like a little headset and I listened to, letters that had been dictated and I transcribed them. It was like an insurance company and we had to send out a lot of letters. So anyway, that's sort of, nobody ever does that anymore. But my job responsibilities were like scheduling appointments, answering the phones and greeting visitors, but didn't have any extended interactions with customers until I had this job at Service Merchandise. Now in the building of this In the basement of this building on Kirkwood Highway in Wilmington was a training room. A meeting, it was like this narrow staircase and like cinder block walls and like it was like the lowest budget space ever that customers were never allowed in. The restrooms were down there, not for customers. Anyway, so there was a training room, a meeting room, and an employee break room. All the training materials were paper back then. So I sat for many hours in that basement reading customer service, sales, ethics and integrity, and technical skills training materials, and then taking quizzes to demonstrate that I'd learned the material. But it was my actual experience on the sales floor interacting directly with customers that informed the tips that we're discussing today. Next slide, please. Some of you may have seen this before. It's the value proposition canvas. When you understand your value proposition, selling doesn't feel like selling. Without even noticing, you find yourself collaborating with your customers to solve problems that they want to solve. And it doesn't feel like work. I loved selling jewelry. I loved looking at new inventory. I loved spending most of my paycheck on buying jewelry. I loved learning what was special about each item. And I loved sharing my enthusiasm for the product with our customers. I especially love finding the most interesting pieces and educating customers about what was special about those items. So when customers would come in, I would be like, oh, you have to see this new thing that we just got. It's so cool. And then I love being part of important moments in the lives of my customers. An engagement ring, a 50th anniversary gift, a graduation gift. I asked lots of questions, not about the budget or about preconceived notions about what they wanted to buy, but asked about who was going to receive the gift. Sales is really all about relationships. You need to have a relationship in order to determine what elements of your value proposition will resonate with your customers. So when you deeply understand your value proposition and the nuances of it, it frees your mental capacity up to focus entirely on relationship. Eventually, I got to a point where customers would come in, is Joanna here today? And if I wasn't working, they'd be like, never mind, we'll come back a different day, because they trusted me to listen to them and to help solve their problems. You can go to the next slide. So especially early on, it can be difficult to concisely articulate your value proposition. The value proposition canvas, which you saw briefly on the previous slide, can be a useful tool in helping you think through it. This article on the left provides some guidance, and Strategizer, which is mentioned in the article, has a video about it that you can look up on YouTube. And then the value proposition canvas is a companion to the business model canvas, which Professor Clark talked about a couple of weeks ago in his talk that was focused on business models for early stage startups. And I gave you a link to that talk on the right in case you missed it. You can get to the next slide. So though I sandwiched tip number 2 into the middle of the trio of tips, for me, it had the most profound impact on my ability to sell successfully, and we're going to spend the most time on this one. Equip your team. There are a couple of specific ways in which I was equipped that made me an effective salesperson. The first thing that equipped me was education. You need to educate your salespeople so they in turn can educate your customers. Being equipped through education dramatically impacts alignment with mission and directly impacts performance. So I know y'all are muted. Be prepared to unmute. Does anybody know what this logo is for? Anybody familiar with this brand?
The watch
Yeah,
company?
Exactly. It's a watch company. Does anybody know what was special about this watch brand? There are a couple of special things about it. You may not. Okay. So
I know it was the jam in the 90s.
it was the jam in the 90s, and that's where we're going in our time machine today. It was definitely the jam. So Curly told me, like, we're going in the time machine. So we're going to go all the way back to 1991. So this watch brand was pretty innovative. And they introduced the slogan, "Don't crack under pressure." And they did that because they had done all these tests on their product where they had, well-known divers wear their watches on their dives and recorded video of them wearing the watches underwater. and demonstrating that the brand could withstand like tremendous amounts of pressure. So we started carrying this brand around 1992, and it was introduced to our team with a lot of fanfare. It was our first luxury watch brand. Now, of course, luxury watch brands, there are lots of well-known luxury watch brands that, like Rolex and Cartier and others that are, very fancy high end. But for Delaware, for the early 90s, when we had been selling brands like Seiko, Casio, Timex, Citizen, and do you remember G-Shocks that had the glow in the dark watch faces? Some of these Tag Heuer watches cost over $300, and that was, a really premium product compared to the other brands that we had carried up until that point. So anyway, we watched videos about what made the watches special, and today that doesn't sound like very innovative or exciting, but in the 90s, with no internet and no CDs and no Wi-Fi and not even really laptops, they had to bring in these VCR TV units, and they set them up on the counter, and we had to get extension cords to get them to run in the middle of the store. And they had done this video campaign to educate us about the product. And then we kept the video unit set up on a corner of our counter near the watch display, and it ran on this loop. And we all got very tired of hearing that ad over and over again all day long, but it was a really engaging thing for our customers and a really innovative marketing thing that they were doing at the time. So along with the introduction of the new brand, something that made little Johanna unhappy, sad face, was a new watch warranty that could be purchased along with the watch at an additional cost. And I was not on board. My personal experience was that watches almost never break, and it seemed really silly to me to sell someone insurance for their watch. So I didn't even offer it to my customers unless a supervisor was nearby watching me. And if a customer directly asked me about additional coverage, I would of course sell it, but I didn't at all like upselling with the warranty. And quickly our management realized that a lot of us had this problem, that we were struggling to sell the new warranty program. So they created a training program for us. And in that training program, I learned the value proposition of the warranty. And it turns out that this warranty was incredible. If you broke or even lost your watch, it would be replaced. No questions asked for up to 3 years. And if your model wasn't available then, you'd be given an amount to allow you to purchase another model. So suddenly, I could tell my customers that they could smash their watch or leave it on an airplane and they'd get a new one. And getting close to the end of a warranty period and tired of your watch, you could accidentally back over it with your car and get a new one and then buy another warranty. This type of warranty was a completely new concept, and it laid the groundwork for similar products we're all familiar with today, like Apple Care. Well, I was converted, and you can probably still hear my enthusiasm for the warranty now as I tell you about it, because I hadn't been thinking about it that way. I had been thinking about it as it's just a thing that made the watch cost more than it needed to cost, rather than something that actually provided value. And because I'd spent so much time talking to customers and selling watches to customers before this, I knew that broken and lost watches were the problems that our customers were solving with new watches. So I went from 0 warranty sales to being the highest warranty salesperson for our division, and it became one of my favorite things to sell. Okay, next slide. So when I first started in this sales position, I was only allowed to sell low-end merchandise, and all the fancy merchandise is up in the front of the store, and that's what everybody sees when they first come in. There were special keys called diamond keys that would unlock the cases that had the high-end items, including the diamonds. But in order to have access to the diamond keys, I had to be trained and take a series of tests, one for each major gemstone. So it took a while. I was only allowed to take 1 test a week, and it culminated in the hardest final test, which was specifically about diamonds. But I learned about synthetic versus natural gems, color, cut, and clarity, the things that everybody learns about diamonds. And I even learned how to use equipment to test whether a diamond was real, which was useful because we were required to perform this test in front of the customer for each diamond sale. I think the jewelry market has changed significantly since the early 90s, when markup was sometimes as high as 10x. But most of the fundamentals I learned through my series of certifications have remained constant. And the information has occasionally been useful over the years. So when I was planning this presentation with Curling, he said that this point in particular resonated with him. And I'll let him tell you why, along with our next focus tip on the next slide.
I was just thinking about, John, I had all these other stories in my head.
Yeah. So this one's about Ganesh.
Yeah. I think one thing is actually.
You got a different one?
No, we could talk about Ganesh. Ganesh is one of he's helping us with the software on a back end, but we've always had this kind of perspective about Fokcus is that long term we want to in some ways equip our everyone who works with Fokcus, not just for this kind of short term helping focus, but actually having it where you take this long-term perspective that we actually just want to equip people that are helping you for a lifetime of success, right? And so I think when you kind of think about, like, sometimes Stephen will hear me say, you know what, Fokcus is really second. You're first, or those groups are first. I think it's really good to do that, to actually have it where you're educating people in your company about things that maybe not will help your company, but will help them. So I thought that was when you talked about your company equipping you, all this knowledge that you got from them when you were 20, you've been using it for years to come. So it was great. So that's why it kind of resonated with me, Johanna.
For sure. And I love that. And I think, that speaks a lot to Fokcus's culture. And I hope you all will think about, how you incorporate, training and investing in your teams as your organizations grow, and how that fits into your company culture. So you can go to the next slide, please, which is the next one. So almost the end. This is the last tip. Next. You don't have to worry about compensation. Go to the next one. If you have the right salespeople and you've equipped them properly, you don't have to be overly concerned about compensation. I know some people think that salespeople are very expensive, and they can be. But many salespeople are accustomed to working on commission, or commission plus a small amount of compensation. But I wanted to share with you that service merchandise job that I kept for years, and that I find myself talking about repeatedly in this series more than 20 years later, I made less than minimum wage. In Delaware, which is where I lived at the time, you could be paid less than minimum wage if you earned a commission, or if you earned tips. So if you were a waitress or you worked on commission, they could pay you under minimum wage. So I think minimum wage was under $5 an hour at the time. I think I made $3.85 an hour, just to sort of put that in perspective. And my commission was less than 1%. For lower end items, I think it was a certain amount, and for higher end items, it was like slightly higher. But I think the highest commission on any item I ever earned was 1.5%, which is kind of sad when you think about the 10x markup at the time. But what I loved about the job was the product and the learning and the new inventory, and then sort of being part of these life events where I was helping the customers solve their problems. So I didn't care at all about my compensation. And when I got a full-time job, because I needed to earn more money, I continued to work evenings and weekends at Service Merchandise. And when I went back to school and worked full-time, I still came back to help out at Service Merchandise during the busy holiday seasons, because I really just wanted to be there and loved that job. So if you find people who care more about your mission than about their compensation, these are potentially great salespeople and also potential co-founders. Their passion for the products will drive their engagement and enthusiasm for learning about the products, and then sharing that information with your customers. Next slide, please. So Brian Chesky, who's the co-founder of Airbnb, tells this great story about interviewing potential candidates, which is something I always think about when we're thinking about adding people to our team. And here in this link, I've included the transcription of his lecture on company culture from the How to Start a Startup series that Y Combinator created. You can actually find the lecture on YouTube. But Brian said, I used to ask them a question. If you had a year left to live, would you take this job? I amended it. People who say yes probably don't like their families. So I changed it to 10 years. I feel like you should use whatever time you have left to live. Whatever you want to do in those last 10 years, you should just do. I really want you to think about that. That was enough time for you to do something you really cared about. And the answer doesn't have to be this company. I say, fine, if what you're meant to do is travel or start a company, just do that. Don't come here, go do that. So I really love that quote and that perspective about finding people who really share your passion for being part of your organization. So let's recap. First, key to understand your value proposition so you can communicate it. Second, you need to equip your team or yourself if you're a solo founder to be able to sell effectively, which means not thinking about it as selling. And third, compensation is not nearly as important as you might think. And those are my tips.
Thank you, Joanna. Thanks for taking us on. What's Doctor Who? It's like the
the TARDIS.
TARDIS. Like we totally just went back. I would even Vivian. She used the word jam. You know, that's solid. You know,
I loved it. She knew right what it was. That was great.
That was great, and even the pictures of you on that part. If anyone has any questions, just put it on the actual on the chat part. But my initial piece to John, when I was listening to this, I think even the fact that I have a couple of questions too, but one is actually on the whole relationship thing, right? Yeah. Miguel's been on, Professor Clark's on, some of these groups, even with Bryce, they always talk about kind of what this relationship aspect of sales is. Can you give us like a little bit insights on that and like how that works with the first 5 customers that some of these startups will have? Yeah.
So I think you want to find people that have the problem that you're trying to solve, right? And then you want to develop a relationship with them. And the early way that you do that is through your customer discovery activities. When you're doing the customer discovery interviews and just trying to learn about the customers before you're ever thinking about selling them something, you form these foundational relationships so that when your product actually does solve their problems, they're hungry for it and they're waiting for it and they're invested in the relationship with you, so that it's kind of a no-brainer that they would become your first customers. But one of the ways that I build a relationship with customers is just by being curious. I think by asking a lot of questions and trying to just really understand what the problems are that they're trying to solve, what their biggest pains are. And if they're trying to solve for a particular community or a particular person, like, I'm trying to buy a birthday present for my niece or something, you want to find out, like, is the niece, 30 years a niece too, because you buy a different thing for the niece, depending on, maybe something not as valuable for a 2-year-old as you would buy for a 30-year-old. And what's the occasion? Maybe, a wedding gift is different than a birthday gift. And so those are very basic examples, from retail sales, but you can take those concepts and use the same thing in trying to discover things about your customers.
I like that. In our pre-cohort meeting, I was thinking what Tripty was saying like, getting that first customer is really difficult, but it helps with the second and third and fourth and fifth. Tripty, did I get that right?
It's true.
How about you were saying?
Hi. Yes. What I was saying is that it's a lot easier to answer the question of how do you get your next customer versus how do you get your first customer.
Sure.
And it's investors understand it, because then how'd you get your first customer? What was your lead time? What channels? But if it's how are you going to get your first customer, then it stays theoretical.
Yeah. The customer discovery is sort of a really nice path, because it's information, it's work that you need to do anyway. And it can yield some pretty deep relationships over time.
That's good. Stephen, you have a question offhand?
I think Joanna kind of took my questions.
That's good. Okay. Let it go. She did.
Because I talked about what I'm going to ask my younger self.
Yes.
Yeah. Usually that's kind of a good go-to.
That's the one.
We get some great answers on that one.
Yeah. That's good. That's funny. You're right, Stephen.
I do have a question for you though. As somebody who's, went through the process as a, someone working in sales, right? And now, you know, you're on the other side of it, maybe managing salespeople, or,
Yeah.
you know, being somebody who's, you know, hiring salespeople for Fokcus or whatever the deal is. You talk about equipping your team and kind of that value proposition with the customer. Do you use those same concepts when you think about value proposition for your employees you're hiring, right?
Yeah.
Good. That's good.
I probably don't use those words, but I absolutely use those ideas. I really think about, you know, do they really truly deeply understand the mission? You know, for us, it's really helping this community of entrepreneurs as they start and grow their startups. And if somebody's not interested in entrepreneurship, for example, Fokcus is probably not a great fit. Unless they're going to be coders or something, and they, you know, they have a particular interest that does align with our mission. But I think as we think about salespeople in particular, they need to be people who have empathy for entrepreneurs, have curiosity about entrepreneurship, who understand how to build relationships with organizations that support entrepreneurship, who maybe have some political capital and some community relationships with decision makers in a key startup ecosystem organizations. And so I think, you know, we do think about, you know, the types of experiences and interests that they have. And then, of course, if they've been a founder, that, you know, that increases their empathy for our customers exponentially, and allows them to sort of come alongside and not just think about how our product can solve their problems, but also how they can more deeply understand the challenges of being an entrepreneur or running an entrepreneurship program.
John, I have a question too from Cora. I was thinking some of our cohorts just got like their first customer, right? For even some of our other customers, just got their first customer, right?
Yay!
You got any advice for someone just got their first one? Like what some of the maybe one or two tips on that, on building that relationship and stuff like?
Don't abandon the relationship. Just because you made the sale doesn't mean the relationship is over. I think, you know, we did a talk not too long ago where we were talking about, I can't remember. Anyway, there was this way that people used to sell software, which was like you sign them up for a 3-year contract, and then you didn't talk to them again until their contract was over in 3 years. And business doesn't work that way anymore. Really, people are buying software as a service. They're subscribing to things rather than paying for it in big chunks. They can leave, you know, as soon as they become unhappy. And so you want to think about particularly your or your salespeople's relationships with your customers as regular and ongoing. And they really are a bridge to product management. So you want to have, you know, this tight integration with whoever's managing your product, like deciding what new features and services that you're going to offer, you know, collecting that information or riding along with the salespeople interacting with the customers. So you have this tight integration between what the customers are asking for and what your product is actually offering.
And I think this is my last question, just for you, just in the whole time capsule thing. When you were learning certain things like the warranty piece, did some other peer help you in that sense, learn more how to sell it? Did you like have some, was this kind of peer to peer, you know, like we do with the cohorts, a lot of the peers, founders help each other? Was there something of that nature that you have to kind of,
you know, that's a great question. And it may be unique to the environment that I was working in, but there were multiple salespeople working on the floor at any given time. And so there always was an opportunity, if you weren't busy with a customer, to listen in on someone else's sale. And that was actually incredibly valuable. And I never thought before that probably really increased my learning, how quickly I was able to learn some of the sales skills, because I was, you know, the whole time I was on a shift, if I wasn't cleaning up something or fixing something or helping a customer, I was listening to somebody else helping a customer and selling. And there were all different levels of experience of people. There were brand new people that had started after me. And then there are people that worked there for 10 years or more who, you know, were very experienced.
That's good. Okay, I love that.
Yeah, that's a great
I feel
question.
like we, even with the cohorts, even the multiple cohorts, maybe doing these kind of
The
mock.
peer group can really help.
Yeah, maybe we could do some mock.
Yeah.
Sunny says you can unmute yourself, but she did have a question for you. It
Sure.
says, is there a rule of thumb on how frequent you should reach out to your new customer without being a bother or having anything new to update them with? That's a great question, Sunny.
I think it's probably case by case. I probably wouldn't leave them for more than 4 weeks. I probably would check in at least once a month, but you can ask them, like, I know you're busy, but I'd love to be able to just connect with you, once a month and find out, how things are going, and think about, like, you want to just find out how they're doing, right? And Carly, maybe you talk to this one because you're really great at sometimes people, they really want to connect with you. You've helped them so much. And so the first thing they want to talk about is how they can help you. And you always redirect that in a really natural way.
Oh yeah. I think that one thing is that, I'm a grandson and son of pastors, right? So I'm always about service, helping out in that way. Before my dad became a pastor, though, he was high up and executive at PepsiCo and Gallo Wines, and that's how we came out in Pasadena. But I just always remembered how, even in that whole sales process, how he would still be more interested in them, right, in their family and how they're doing and can they help, right? How he can help that process. And so I always found out Dad was always, in some ways, really great at probably doing that. Saying, like, I know you want to help me, but like, how are you doing, right? And that was always great, a great mentor for me, even when I was really little, just coming in there and seeing him do that. It's really important just to say, I guess the word having a relationship. So when he was teaching me certain things, he said that's the most important thing, is actually to build that relationship and that let it be authentic. And so you can always kind of co-create on things. He would co-create with customers, even at PepsiCo. Like he always told me these things, how they would co-create on making certain things happen, or how the sales would go, or when they would touch base. And so you're right about that whole touch base piece.
Yeah.
Hope that answered your question, Johanna, on that part.
Yeah, it's great. But I love that you always, redirect and really focus people in on, like, how are you doing and how's your stress level and do you have what you need, and just really shift the conversation to be more about listening, because listening is really a powerful sales tool.
That was it. Stephen, this is a really great question, and we'll end it with this one. Stephen has a good question.
Sure. So, Joanna, I know you mentioned some awesome tips today. You answered some great questions, and you talked about your experience, doing sales in the early 90s. So, today we're sitting in 2021. About 30 years later or so. What are some of the biggest things that you've seen change? From your experience in the 90s, right? When you're going through it and say, "Wow, that's evolved," or "That's changed," or "We learned this, and now, here's what we know today." So are there
30 years sounds like a really long time.
that's a long time.
Some of you probably not even 30 yet. I know some of you are not 30 yet. So that's anyway, one of the biggest things that's changed is, I don't have to run an extension cord to a VCR attached to a TV that I sit on the counter in order to expose my customers to advertisements about a new product. There are all different ways, Google Ads and the internet and, YouTube, and even forums like Tech School, where you can more organically interact with customers, and your marketing campaigns and your approach to sales can be a bit more organic and a bit more personalized. And there are all kinds of technology tools that will help you sort of track and manage your sales process. If you don't know what a CRM is, you probably want to look into that. A customer relationship management software like HubSpot, which is completely free, can be a really great tool for managing contacts and for keeping track of if you've followed up with various people and setting reminders for yourself. Even Salesforce.com, which is a more expensive version that came out of USC, that also does that maybe is more for more mature companies these days. But these types of software solutions and tools to help manage sales workflows were really not available at all in the early 90s. They were, the process was paper, and then even, into the 2000s, it was really for companies that could afford to spend a lot of money on software. And now those tools are completely available for startups to make your process more efficient and better. And maybe that occurs to me that maybe we need to do a tech school talk on tools.
Yeah, probably do one on tools and how you use HubSpot and
Dubsado and things like that.
Totally. I think Sunny, when Sunny asked that question, I was thinking like, oh yeah, you can add these reminders in HubSpot, and it will remind you certain things like that, Sunny. So I think that's great. We have Lois on. She's like this renowned expert. Lois, any
he knows
feedback?
what it was like 30 years ago.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot.
You remember, right, Lois?
You see what?
Remember, I really don't think I have anything to add. I think Johanna's talk has been extremely informative, and in particularly, I thought the section on how sales have changed and that you need to maintain continual contact with your customers.
Yeah,
I think that's extremely valuable, particularly in this day and age where people are on social media and they just expect constant communication. So I think that was extremely valuable right there.
And that's an excellent point you make about social media, which we didn't mention at all. That's something that you really do have to pay attention to. If you don't have social media presence, you're missing like a whole segment of customers.
That's great. Well, Joanna, thanks so much. I mean, thanks for. I know we spent some time picking out what picture of you we wanted on there. I think you picked out some fun ones.
I didn't show the big hair one.
Your next talk can do the Molly.
I can do the Molly Ringwald.
Next time you get to show the Molly Ringwald, 16 candle look.
All right, we'll have to tie that one in.
Okay, Stephen, can you? I know you're gonna wrap up, and we'll do speed networking, and we'll all talk.
Sure. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, we do a speed networking session afterwards. So if you want to take part in that, everyone just gets matched up randomly, and then you'll have 5 or 10 minutes to just network. We took this idea from San Diego Startup Week. It was a great thing that they had. So if you want to be a part of that, feel free to jump on, or to stay on, I should say. Johanna, thank you for speaking today. Thanks for sharing some awesome tips, some awesome stories, and everything.
That's a great I can't really see it. Joanna with big hair.
Yeah, it's good.
But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in live on Zoom. If you have a chance, feel free to give us a like, leave a comment, share your thoughts on this video on our YouTube channel. If you did miss anything from today, this video is recorded and actually published there as well. So you can rewatch it, or, rewatch all the tips that Johanna shared and everything like that. But thanks for tuning in, and we will see you in the next episode of Tech School.